Alright, so obviously you've seen my tier list before. It's pretty self-explanatory. A is the best, B is really good, C is pretty good, D is almost bad but not really memorable, and then F is easily the worst film in the franchise. So we're going to start off, and obviously all these films are in release order, so we're doing it from Iron Man all the way to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and we're starting off with Iron Man, and I would definitely say this is one of the best MCU films. And a big part of that is that as it's the first one, it doesn't have the rest of the weight of the MCU on its shoulders. But what it really does impactful is that it tells this story of this man who starts out as this normal rich guy, gets captured by terrorists, becomes a hero, makes a suit in a cave, comes out, becomes a new man, becomes Iron Man, and the story of Tony Stark, Iron Man, is just incredible, and the way his character is portrayed throughout the whole MCU up until Endgame is just fantastic, and the performance, and then of course the performance of Robert Downey Jr. is just fantastic. Perfect casting as Iron Man. Can't imagine anyone else playing him. And also the action sequences could be pretty good. There's not a lot of action in this movie. The comedy is great. The other cast members like Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, Phil Coulson, all that stuff was great. So the movie overall is great. Has some weak points, but it still is really great. Then we have The Incredible Hulk. Not as good as Iron Man, but still a pretty good film. So I would actually put The Incredible Hulk in the C tier. This is one that I can actually respect because, you know, it's it's an MCU film. It stars a different actor as the Hulk. I kind of like Edward Norton just a little bit more, just the way that the story was organized. Though I like Mark Ruffalo. I kind of like Mark Ruffalo just a little bit more. But I feel like with this movie, they really did a great job of impacting the story of like Brazil. Funny thing is, we're getting a new Fast and Furious movie, and the director of this movie, of The Incredible Hulk, is directing the new Fast X movie. Pretty crazy, and that movie takes place in Brazil. Fast 5 took place in Brazil. Amazing movie. So, and all the Hulk action in this movie is great. You know, it does have a weird fitting in the story. I like Thunderbolt Ross. I thought Abomination was pretty good, especially the way they brought him back into the MCU and She-Hulk. Overall, I thought the movie was good. It wasn't fantastic, but it was pretty good. And then we got Iron Man 2, which I would say is probably the MCU's first misfire, but I would still say it's actually really fun. I'm going to put it in D, because I think there's things in this movie that, because before I used to put it in the F tier, used to hate it, but after rewatching it a couple times, I'm like, there's actually things to really enjoy in this movie. Like, the action is great when it happens. The comedy is pretty good. Robert Downey Jr. is still good as Tony Stark, though. This is probably the weakest film of Tony Stark that he's ever played in as. Whiplash, but the villains in here, Justin Hammer, Whiplash, all of them are pretty ass. And so I just couldn't really. There's a lot of story issues in this film. Do you get the introduction of Black Widow in it? It's pretty great, and she's a badass. You get the changeroo of James Rhodes instead of Terrence Howard. It's Don Cheadle. I kind of like this version of James Rhodes instead of Terrence Howard. And then we get Thor. I'm sorry, but every single time I watch this movie, I just get so frustrated because I can't get into this. It's so hard to like this movie because the movie starts off as this Frost-Giant Asgardian war movie. As you tell the backstory of that, then Thor is about to become king. but it gets interrupted by Frost Giants sneaking into the weapons vault. They don't steal anything. Thor wants to know why, so he grabs his brother and his friends to go to Jotunheim, attack the Frost Giants, where you do get a cool battle scene where you get to see some of Thor's strengths. But then that gets Thor banished from Asgard. He becomes just this mortal human. Then it just becomes this humor-ish film with these characters that are very out of water drama. Loki becomes the new king of Asgard, but then he wants to destroy Jotunheim, and then it's like the whole story, it doesn't really know what it's trying to be. It's like yeah, I guess you could say the setup for Thor's character was interesting. The whole cast is great. I do like the cast, but the whole storyline and the way that it's all set up, it was just kind of weird. The action was kind of cool. There are some emotional scenes in it. The cast is great. The music is great. But the story of it was just kind of... The story is what really bothers me for it. And at the same time, it's like... The story of it didn't really feel as strong for me. As when you think of the story of Thor, it's like, I couldn't really get into it as much. Because like when you look at Thor's story in other films, it's a lot stronger. So for me, it has to go in the F tier. I'm very sorry. It's a film I'm very frustrated with. Okay, actually, you know what? Okay, now that I think about it, I'm gonna put it in D. I'm gonna put it in D, above Iron Man 2. That's where it's gonna go. It's gonna go there. Then we have Captain America vs. the First Avenger. I actually think this film actually has a lot of good stuff. The origin story of Steve Rogers is what really makes this film so amazing. Just the way that he tells, like, I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from. That's profound storytelling right there. But even then, all of the characters, Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter. You got not Stanley Wilson. No, that's a classmate's name. No, wait, what? I was about to say, Thomas, Colonel Phillips, I forgot, Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones plays Colonel Phillips. Awesome casting. Plays a pretty good war general. Stanley Tucci, pretty good as Dr. Erskine. The cast is great. The music is great from Alan Silvestri. Some of the action I think is pretty good, and the whole war aesthetic I thought was great. Red Skull is an okay villain. I wish they could have added better stuff to him, considering the whole war aspect kind of had this political stuff, whereas like the other Captain America films I feel like do better with the political era. But this film is just kind of old-fashioned. War is good is good, bad is bad. So, and then of course, the sacrifice when he sacrifices himself at the end, pretty good. So I liked the first Avenger. And then we have the first Avengers film, The Avengers. I personally think this is a great movie. Obviously, it's not as complex as the other superhero team-up movies, but what makes it so much fun is really the banter between the characters and the action sequences that happen through that. Where it's basically just a simple idea where you have these characters, where you have the characters assembling. They don't like each other at first, but when this big threat happens, they have to come together, come to their senses, and work together as a unit and defend the Earth. And to me, that is some profound stuff. But what really makes it so eventful is that the characters, Tony Stark is amazing, but he has this great arc where he is the one that wants to sacrifice himself to protect the Earth. Captain America, he's trying to get used to the real world, and he's leading this team of new heroes. Thor, he's responsible for Loki, and so that kind of has consequences on him. Hulk, he's trying to learn how to be a good guy. Black Widow, kind of weak, though kind of cool. Hawkeye had a cool arc where he comes from a bad guy, being mind controlled, and now gets to fight in the good guys. And then of course the third act is just absolutely fantastic. All the action is great. The Hulk fights, the Thor fights, the smashing of Loki, all of it was great. it just puts a big grin on your face. It is a crowd pleaser. It is a great, and it's also one of the first movies that I remember seeing in the theater. That I remember when Hulk was waking up Iron Man with his roar. I remember I was falling asleep and it woke me up and scared me. So it easily goes up in the top tier. Then we have Iron Man 3. We're now in phase 2. Iron Man 3 is a pretty good film. I talk about this every time I talk about it. I think that the exploration of Tony Stark after the Avengers and him dealing with PTSD was something very interesting. But then also just seeing him be Tony Stark out. What is a Tony Stark when he's not Iron Man, fighting outside of the suit? And they explored that really interestingly. I don't know if that's a word, but he has him use ornaments as bombs. Something so much fun. There's so much funness in that. All of the characters, the new Harley Quinn kid, I thought that was a pretty cool little character. The movie's also pretty funny. The score is also pretty brilliant, and then the third act is just massive with all the Iron Man suits. It's pretty good. The villain itself is kind of meh. Like, Syndrome was a much better villain, and so was kind of Electro. Honestly, that storyline, the best villain to do that was Riddler from Batman Forever. But honestly, if I'm going to be honest, I'm going to put it in the C because I think it is a pretty good movie. And then we get Thor: Dark World, which I think is actually one of the worst films in the MCU. And, yeah, they're going to go in F tier. Just nothing memorable about this movie. Of course, the action sequences are amazing. The cast is likable. The world looks amazing. And the score from Brian Tyler, who did the score for the Mario movie, as well as, I think, some of the Fast and Furious films. The score in this movie is amazing. The villain itself is terrible. Nothing in this movie is really memorable except Loki dies for the second time and then comes back in Thor Ragnarok. Thor's mom dies, which that kind of had some emotional attachment to it, and I actually did kind of care about it. The whole storyline of the alignments and the elements and the emergence and all that, it didn't really make sense to me, so it easily is one of the worst films that Marvel's ever made. Then we got Captain America the Winter Soldier, and I'm actually going to put this in the B tier, just because I don't think it's as great as, say, like Iron Man or the Avengers. I think of all the, I probably would put it above Iron Man, but I don't have that love for it as much as I want it to. But it is truly a great movie. You know, the exploration, because the thing about, I think this is probably the best sequels of after the Avengers, as it explores this character that can't really go back to his own world. Where Iron Man can go back to his lab and with Iron Man suits, Thor can go back to Asgard. Where does Captain America go? He can't go back anywhere because he's stuck in the present, because he's from an older time that we're not from. And so I thought that was kind of interesting in the way they handled that. Beyond that, the way they did the spy espionage thriller aspect of it, the action sequences I think are great. All the brutalness of it and the hand-to-hand combat in it, which is fantastic. And just kind of showing you a different type of Captain America that we've never really seen before, which is awesome. Sebastian Stan playing the Winter Soldier was awesome. The introduction of Falcon in the movie was great. This version of Black Widow was great. The introduction to Sharon Carter was pretty cool. The introduction to Crossbones was pretty cool. The Alexander Pierce character I thought was also really great. And also, seeing more Nick Fury in this film was also pretty great. And it did something so great. It did a lot of great stuff, but at the same time, it's not one of my favorites. It was great. I thought it was really good, but it's not one of my favorites, unfortunately. But it is very good. Then we get Guardians of the Galaxy, the very first film as we're talking about, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 this weekend. Now, back then, of course, I was a Marvel hater, so I didn't really know much about the Guardians. I was expecting just action. This film did not have a lot of great action, though it had good action. It had good action. Most of them were just space out fights. But when you really think about the movie, it's more of a character-driven story. Where you look at all these characters, and Star-Lord, lost his mom when he was 8 years old, and then gets abducted by aliens. Plus loves listening to music. Then you get Drax the Destroyer, loses his family to Ronan. Gamora got kidnapped by Thanos in her homeworld. Rocket and Groot. Obviously, we've seen Guardians 3 now. We know Rocket's backstory. Groot, just this very interesting tree-like character that Vin Diesel played such a great character in. And all of the characters are great, and you feel for them, but they're also very funny, and they have this uniqueness to them, but then you also feel very emotional for them, especially when Groot dies. Even though we have another Groot come in with Baby Groot, Teenage Groot, and then Swole Groot. This version of Groot was the best version of Groot we've ever gotten. And so for me, this is easily one of the best films in the MCU. It's not quite as good as, say, like Iron Man or the Avengers. And it also is one of those team-up movies where you can do a team-up movie and it can still be fun without doing just separate movies for every one of them. The movie is a little bit kind of short. It feels a little bit shorter when you watch it. But at the same time, it's still something fantastic. I would have loved to see a little bit better action sequences to kind of make it unique. But at the same time, I thought it was something special for MCU fans. It definitely did something unique. I'm not putting it above Avengers or Iron Man because I like those stories a lot more, and I connect to those characters just a little bit more. And then we have Avengers: Age of Ultron. Wow. This movie is actually pretty good. I haven't seen it in a long time. Personally, one of the things I love about this movie is the action sequences, the introduction to new characters like Vision, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. All three amazing characters to introduce. Well, I think the Fox version of Quicksilver was much better. Anyway, Scarlet Witch was great. The introduction to Vision was pretty good. It has a lot of good moments, but it also has one of the most confusing storylines in the MCU, where Ultron is obsessed with extinction, but he also doesn't like he's made for peace. Then why does he want to kill the Avengers? Kind of doesn't make sense. I think James Spader played a pretty good role. Speaking of James Spader, I remember I saw this video of him on the Jimmy Fallon show, and he was talking about how New York was the greatest city in the world. Probably should go look that video up, because honestly, if you're a mature person that likes talking about deep topics, it's a good video to watch. And especially for stuff like that, it's really cool. But besides that, the movie is good. It's not amazing, but it is really good, though. You're going to go in the C tier. Has a lot of enjoyability to it, but it's not the best. And then we have Ant-Man. I thought this film was actually really good. Paul Rudd was great. I thought the runtime actually fit perfectly for the story they were telling. The action was pretty good. The whole cast of characters that they chose for this film, with Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, Hope Van Dyne Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne, Michael Pena in this film. All of that was great. So, and then of course, it has a storyline similar to Iron Man. The movie's also incredibly funny. But honestly, I can look past that, and it is a very enjoyable film. So you're going to go in the B tier above the first Avenger. And now we're entering Phase 3 with Captain America: The Civil War. Now, I have a video coming out in just a couple hours talking about this movie, but because it really means a special deal to my place in my heart. But this movie is easily one of my personal favorite films in the MCU. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but really just the story of... I just love the way that this movie was able to tell a story of Captain America while at the same time involving the Avengers and introducing new characters, introducing new characters and setting up new stories for future movies, and all of it making sense, and all of it being complex, and all of it being great. While at the same time having the fantastical superhero action and having these and sticking to the political thriller aspect, but also telling that political story of these heroes who should the Avengers be in charge of the government, or should they just be these heroes that are like just random heroes protecting the world, but kind of leaving behind of what they leave behind? And then of course, you know, the stuff of Tony Stark and Captain America. By the way, I'm Team Cap. Spoiler alert for tomorrow for Civil War's videos this week. But yeah, this is definitely a W from the Russos. And then of course the airport sequence. Come on. Then we got Doctor Strange. I thought this was another really good movie. The visuals in this movie. The visuals in this movie are fantastic. Forget Inception. This movie was... The special effects in this movie are amazing. The character of Doctor Strange I thought was pretty good. The whole introduction to the world of magic I thought was really great. The score from Michael Giacchino, amazing. The villains are a bit lackluster, and the whole Marvel MCU template was kind of meh. But I don't really care. This was a good movie. I'm going to put it in the B tier, but above First Avenger, because I actually liked it a little bit more. The runtime can feel a little short. It's kind of like Guardians, where it's like you tell a really good story, but it feels very short. I can forgive it for that. Then we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, this is one that I don't love as much as the first Guardians, but I still do really like it. It's not going to go super high, but it's going to go in the C tier. What I love about this film is that it really just goes, it just does a lot of enjoyability to it. From the soundtrack, to the character moments, to the humor, a lot of this movie just really encapsulates entertainment value. And that's the best thing that this movie does. Is like from the very first scene where the Guardians are protecting the Sovereign batteries from the Basilisks, and you have Baby Groot dancing, and you hear Mr. Blue Sky playing. This movie was my introduction to Mr. Blue Sky's song, and then even my favorite scene of the whole film is when Yondu, Rocket, and Groot are escaping the Ravager clan, and Yondu just kills all of the Ravagers out of his way, and you have "Come a little bit closer, you're my kind of man. It's getting so strong. Come a little bit closer. I'm all alone, and the night is so long." Ba-bow, ba-bow, ba-bow. Getting chills from that. And then even in the third act, like with Kurt Russell as Ego, pretty good villain. Kind of threatening, but pretty good. I thought it was kind of a weird twist. It's probably the most darkest film in the MCU. It was probably like the most twisted one. I'm not the biggest fan of like some of the story. Like the whole story literally happened because Rocket stole batteries. So I thought the way they used Rocket in this film was kind of weird. But at the same time, they still had a great arc with him, especially in the interactions that he had with Yondu in the film was great. And then, of course, the sacrifice of Yondu, the whole character of Yondu in this film was amazing. I thought the way they handled that was perfect, and they handled his story great. And the cruel humor of Groot, I thought was just terrible. I didn't really like it as much, and the action scenes could have been a lot better. That's something I wish they could have done better. It's like they don't feel like they have stakes. It feels like it just feels like noise to me. But at the same time, I still enjoyed Guardians 2, and it's still going in the C tier. Then we got Spider-Man Homecoming. The first film in the MCU was Spider-Man. I thought it was actually really great, where it kind of takes that contrast of what the past two original Spider-Man movies did, where Tobey Maguire was all about wanting to get that girl, and he finally gets it, but he has to let her go because he has to protect her from being Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield, his goal is trying to get that robber, but he realizes he's the hero, but he also has to let his own girlfriend go to protect her. And in this film, the whole goal of the movie is Spider-Man trying to become an Avenger, and when he finally gets the offer to become an Avenger, he has to turn it down because he realizes he has to be the hero. Sometimes there's got to be someone to protect the little guy. And that's an awesome theme that I never thought we would see in a superhero film. So I thought that was great. Likewise, the whole teenage cast was great. The fact that this movie feels like a Spider-Man in high school is great, which it is. The whole soundtrack was great. All the comedy bits was great. Ned is one of my favorite characters. Forget Liz. MJ is the real one. Flash Thompson kind of doesn't look like Flash Thompson, but he looks cool. He was funny. Michael Keaton as Vulture, one of the most threatening villains. The only problem I really have with this movie that turns it down, it's overall a great movie. They probably should stop mentioning the MCU too much. Just make it its own contained story. And also make the action sequences better. Like maybe this could have been the introduction to nanotech, where it's like the whole reason why these characters are having this tech is because of the Battle of New York stuff. I thought that was really cool. The way that it was done, though, I just kind of feel like the whole Vulture suit just feels like a whole Iron Man suit, except designed to be a Vulture. I feel like that this could have, they could have spent those 8 years creating nanotech, and that would have inspired Iron Man to be having nanotech in the Infinity War film. I guess they didn't want to do that, but it would have been cool and have a set up cool fight for not only for Spider-Man but also a setup for nanotech in the future of the MCU, since we've been getting that a lot lately. So I'm still gonna put this really high, and I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Still a good placement there. Then we get Thor Ragnarok, and I have to say this is the best Thor film, easily one of the best ones. You're definitely gonna go in the A tier. I just love Thor Ragnarok. It's so much fun. The action sequences are great. The whole world of it, the comedy is great. The characters are great. But really, the way that it was able to tell us much more serious story with a much more threatening villain where you cared about her, but you also you felt threatened by her, and she was much more badass, and you kind of felt for the characters when they were getting beaten. Thor as a character himself also had some growth. And overall, it just kind of mixed in all the right blends of it. The runtime, you can notice, it does kind of move a little too fast. But and I think that's because the runtime just kind of feels like the runtime of Black Panther. Which, speaking of Black Panther, which I'm done talking about the Ragnarok, Black Panther is another great MCU film that, honestly, I gotta put in the A tier above Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm sorry, Guardians, I love you. But Black Panther is a film that I just get amazed by when I talk about it. The way that this movie is done, if you want to go to action movies, Infinity War is there. If you want to go to story-driven movies, Black Panther is all about that. As it tells this story as you have T'Challa trying to be a good king, but he's a good guy, and it's hard for a good man to be king. And the way you explore that is great, as Killmonger has this philosophical thing where there's all these people that look like us around the world, and we could be using that vibranium to help those other people that need it. We could have stopped all these wars. We could have stopped slavery. We could have stopped all of that with them. Instead, you decide to hide it because you wanted to protect your precious vibranium. And it's like all of his reasonings, it's great. And that's what makes MCU villains so great, is because when you feel, is that one of the best things is when they're sympathetic. And this is one of those villains that is sympathetic. And I love that for him. And I love in the end that at the end, in the end credit scene, T'Challa opens the whole world of Wakanda to the world. And they're doing what Killmonger did, except he's doing it in the way that it's supposed to be done, in the good way. And so I thought that I like that. Like the villain was wrong. Like the villain was right, but he was wrong in the way he was doing it. But he was also a monster at the same time. Not saying he was officially good, because he burnt the heart-shaped herb. He killed Zuri, and he was almost setting up a whole war with the world. So he was still villainous, but his motivation in wanting to do that, half of it was good. So I thought that was great. Beyond that, the introduction to the world of Wakanda was amazing. All of the characters and the casting that they decided to do, with Letitia Wright as Shuri, Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, Danai Gurira as Okoye. You get Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda. And I like the Lion King feel of it with the ancestral plane afterlife sequences. all in the whole life of African culture. It feels different, but it's also something great. And also the score from Ludwig Göransson is of course great. This movie is fantastic. The only thing I would say is bad about it is really the action sequences. Besides that, this is a top tier film, and I would say that this is why Ryan Coogler is one of the best directors in the MCU as of this point, which we'll talk about with Wakanda Forever when we get to it. And then we get into one of my favorite films of all time with Avengers: Infinity War. I would say this is one of my favorite films of all time. This is my favorite film of all time. Easily one of the best. Not only, and it's not just that it's fan service. How do you include every single character from the Avengers to the Guardians of the Galaxy to Doctor Strange to Spider-Man to Black Panther? It's because everything is established, and all the worlds are established. So you're able to have all these different character interactions, and have all these characters go to the familiar worlds with Wakanda and New York, while at the same time telling these deep, complex stories of our characters that we've been with for almost 10 years, and at the same time giving this great story with Thanos, and the motion capture that they do for him is amazing, but the story of him, and it's another one of those villains that you feel sympathetic for him, where half the population, if I kill half the population, everyone will be equal, the universe will be in balance. And it's like you kind of agree with him, but at the same time, you know he is crazy, and you know that it's terrible of killing half of life in the universe. And then you just kill off half the characters in the end. And even though you know they're coming back, you still feel emotional for them. You kill off Groot again, you kill off Black Panther, you kill off Scarlet Witch, you kill off Falcon, you kill off Spider-Man, and it's horrifying. It's very, very horrifying. And then, of course, all the character interactions from Iron Man and Doctor Strange, Thor and Rocket, which was my favorite relationship with the entire film. The Thor and Wakanda sequence, all of that was great. This movie is story well done, character-driven story, but also fan service at the same time. It is just a massive, great conclusion, but also handles story very well. Then we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought the film was actually pretty good. Not quite as good as the first Ant-Man, but still was a worthy sequel. I thought, it had very low stakes. The story was good. I thought the story of the characters was good. The Wasp was a great addition. I'm gonna put it in C because I like the story of the Incredible Hulk and the way that it was structured better. Plus the action's better. I know the Incredible Hulk doesn't have the better story, but it's a much better movie in my eyes. Then we have Captain Marvel, another pretty good MCU film. Not the best, but it is good. Brie Larson, I thought was actually pretty good as Captain Marvel. I thought Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, the de-aged Nick Fury, and the CGI that they decided to do with him, absolutely fantastic. Ben Mendelsohn as Talos was great. And I'm excited to see them in the Secret Invasion series. That's something I'm very excited to see next month. I like the whole story of it. It was really cool to me. It's like, yeah, it's good, but it's not that great. I honestly did like it, and it's like it was kind of clever in a good way. So I honestly did like it. And then of course some of the action I thought was pretty cool. Goose the Cat was great. Maria Rambeau was a cool addition. And then of course the villains are just terrible. Jude Law was kind of a cool villain because he had that cool relationship with Captain Marvel. And then we get into the big hunk chunk, Avengers Endgame. And where is this going? Well, if you saw my video from 2 weeks ago or last week, this is my second favorite movie of all time. I love Avengers Endgame. What this film really did is that it took our characters that have survived and told different stories with them of how they're grieving, how do they move on, and how did the blip affect them. As you have these characters that we've known each other, as we've known them for many years, and even the new characters that come in with Hawkeye and Ant-Man, I love the way they were impacted into the story. But even the time travel elements, it really was a fan service film, and really did a lot of great stuff that kind of gave characters second chances to try again with certain things, with Thor talking to his mom, and Cap fighting himself and looking and getting another look at his past ass, but also getting tired of himself. Iron Man kind of getting a second chance with his dad a little bit. Nebula kind of regaining that relationship with her sister that she never really got a chance to have. And then once you get into the whole meat of Thanos and coming back and the whole thing of Nebula, great. But then the third act, where you meet Captain America on the battlefield, you see this whole massive army of Thanos. Then you hear on your left, Doctor Strange portal opens, Black Panther, Okoye, Shuri walk out, Falcon flies out, all the portals open up, all the characters from Titan, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Star-Lord, Mantis, yeah! And then the whole army of Wakanda walks out, and then all the other characters just show up. Pepper walks in Iron Man's suit. Giant Man walks out, and then Avengers assemble, and it's just the whole fight is beautiful. The score from Alan Silvestri is amazing. The conclusion to Iron Man's story, all the fights in this movie are amazing. The whole fight in this movie is amazing. This movie is truly something special for the entire MCU, and it absolutely did it perfectly. And then we get Spider-Man Far From Home, which I thought was fine. It was good. Not the best MCU film, but it still did pretty good. I thought the Spider-Man action in this film did much better than what Homecoming did, where it's like, the action in this movie kind of felt weird. But for me, I thought this movie was pretty good. The Mysterio stuff, another villain scored by Tony Stark, kind of predictable. But I thought it was the funniest MCU film, but it also felt too funny. But at the same time, I still really enjoyed it. But at the same time, because of its story issues, I'm still going to put it in the C tier, but it's going to go at the bottom of the B tier films with Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then Far From Home. And then we got Black Widow. The first one in Phase 4 I thought was pretty good. It may feel like a late Phase 3 movie, but at the same time, that doesn't change the fact that I still enjoyed the film. I thought, all the action sequences were great. All the characters that were introduced were pretty good. Taskmaster was wasted. All the other stuff was just kind of, why did it need to be here? And then, of course, the whole third act, I thought was kind of cool. Like, I didn't really care if there was CGI stuff. Yeah, it was kind of unrealistic, but I didn't really care for it. I still had a fun time with this movie, and I liked how brutal it was. So for me, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. It's not quite as good as, say, like the films in B tier. It's not quite as big as Endgame, but it's still like a personal film that I thought was good. You know what? I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I'm gonna put it above Incredible Hulk. And then we got Shang-Chi. Probably one of the most difficult films in the entire MCU because I'm sorry about that. It has the action I love. All the choreographed action sequences in this movie are amazing. The introduction to Shang-Chi in this film, the introduction to all these different characters with her sister and Awkwafina, and the villain in Mandarin is great. But here's what my big problem is. And also the world of Hollow is great. But my big problem is they basically they do the battle with Shang-Chi and his father, which I thought was great. But then they just undercut it for this big dragon fight, all these monsters coming in and trying to eat the whole universe. And then it cuts for a joke. Wong picks them, and then basically gets them for an Avengers mission. And I'm like, you undercut the drama. You undercut these characters' arcs. Now granted, I'm excited for Shang-Chi 2. I hope that film is much better and they actually complete those characters' arcs. The only character that I thought was great in this movie that actually had a completed arc was Shang-Chi's sister, who actually had a completed arc, was set up from the very beginning, had a great story from the very beginning, and was completed in the end, in the end credit scene, where she becomes the new leader of the Ten Rings. Executed perfectly. So, but everything else just kind of felt bad. And so it's like, it's tough for me to enjoy it with all the story issues where I'm like, so the whole movie, you wanted to get your kids just to think your wife is behind this wall, just to get killed by these monsters, and then undercut for a joke, and then get caught into the Avengers. It's kind of felt like a waste to me. It's like, I feel like they could have done this story so much better. It's like they had stories set up, and it just kind of felt weird at the end. So I'm going to put it in the C, in the D tier. I know a lot of you are going crazy right now. I enjoyed this movie, but the story had a lot of frustrating parts with it. Then we got Eternals. This is honestly easily one of the worst films in the MCU. And a big part of that is they really try to do a lot. It's not that one character was the main character. They try to make every character the main character. And when you're doing a movie like that, it's kind of hard to do. And it doesn't really work. And none of the characters I would say really the big standout characters were Angelina Jolie's character, acted for Athena, you got Gilgamesh, and then Kingo. I thought those were the only three characters that I loved from this film. Everyone else just kind of had these character issues that just felt kind of weird. This is probably the most beautiful MCU film. I like the jokes. I thought it was pretty funny. The whole story of it was kind of weird. And it also just kind of felt too long. Whereas like it was supposed to be this superhero epic, but it just did not feel anything. And even, it's also one of those films where I'm like, I don't really care about going back to rewatch it. And it's like, if I ever do an MCU video where I'm going to talk about my favorite scenes from the movies, I don't think I can really choose a favorite scene from this movie because I don't remember much about it. It's like, there's so much going on, it's like, what can I possibly have chosen? And then we get the big colossal film, Spider-Man No Way Home. This is by far, I think, one of the best films since Avengers Endgame that I've ever seen. Really, of course, you know, the whole plot of it is Peter Parker asks Doctor Strange. I mean, obviously, you know, the first 20 minutes is pretty boring, and it's pretty not well executed. And Peter Parker asks Doctor Strange to get a spell, but Doctor Strange doesn't even care to explain the parameters as to what the spell may cause. But once you move out of that and you introduce the plotline of the villains, you bring the past Spider-Man back in here, and you do a great story for Tom Holland's Peter Parker, it just becomes this whole different level of peak Spider-Man movie cinema. That just, it's not that it's just fan service. It's fan service done right, where the characters mattered in the story, the characters are established, so you're able to do different stories with them, a different story in this context, and I loved the way they did it. Certain villains didn't work as much, you know, I was disappointed with what they did with Lizard and Sandman. Easily Green Goblin was the best villain in the movie, and he is the definitive villain of this film. All the action was great, the special effects were great, all the characters. The movie had the best tone between humor and action, but I mean, drama. And especially, like, I was even getting emotional when Aunt May died, and then you get the fact that you actually have a complete arc, that this whole trilogy was his origin story. That's something so profound, and the fact that he's, in the future movies, he's going to be able to go on and be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that everybody loves. I'm so excited for that. This movie was peak cinema. I love Spider-Man No Way Home. It is peak. And then we get Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I thought this movie was actually pretty good on first watch. But as time has passed on, I'm like, yeah, it's not as good as the first time I watched it. I mean, it has some unique factors. Of course, all of the Sam Raimi stuff is amazing. You have all the Sam Raimi action in this film, fantastic. All the Sam Raimi horror effects, fantastic. Doctor Strange is a character, the story that they explore with him, where why would he do the craziest stuff, is because Doctor Strange is dangerous. Every Doctor Strange every version of Doctor Strange in the multiverse is dangerous. Scarlet Witch, I kind of didn't really like as a villain as much anymore. It's like, and also, if you're going to do a movie about the Multiverse of Madness, you really should do a lot more interesting stuff. Take inspiration from from Everything Everywhere All at Once. That won Best Picture. Taking inspiration from that. But overall, it was pretty good. And I will say, I can ignore all the Scarlet Witch and stuff. And the Illuminati was kind of wasted. I'm kind of sad that John Krasinski won't be playing Mr. Fantastic in the main MCU timeline. But we'll talk about that in another video. Overall, I like this movie, and it's probably better than Far From Home. Then we got Thor: Love and Thunder, and this was one of those films where I'm like, this movie could have been so much better. Because, like, it had so much potential to be this great movie, and it just did not work for me. It's like, the comedy, now I will say this, I rewatch it, and I'm like, this is something, I want more of this. Like, I like that scene in the Dark Dimension, and it feels like a comic book come to life. I love that sequence. It's a great sequence. But it also feels like this movie could have been something different. At the same time, I still do kind of enjoy it, but the comedy, everything else, still kind of holds it back. And I feel like this movie could have actually had potential to be one of the best MCU films, probably better than Thor Ragnarok. So, it had a lot of tone issues, and then Gore the God Butcher was not threatening. Though I did kind of like the performance of Christian Bale in the film. So I'm gonna put it above. Okay, actually, you know what? Shang-Chi's going above Thor: Love and Thunder. I like Shang-Chi more than Thor. And then we get Wakanda Forever. So listen. Obviously, this film had a really bad hand with the passing of Chadwick Boseman. But honestly, I was like, how are you gonna do Black Panther 2? Without him and without the main cast, and honestly, I thought they handled it to perfection. And one of the unique things about this film is that it didn't need to feel like it was. We know it's a part of the MCU, but at the same time, it felt distinctive to the story that they were telling. And that's something so profound. The story that they told, they were able to continue the story of the characters. In the arcs from the first movie, but they're also dealing with the grief of T'Challa and King T'Challa, but also finding new ways to expand it and learn how to deal with grief. At the same time, you also get a great villain in Namor the Submariner, a very powerful threat that, at the same time, it's like, this was the better version of what Adam Warlock could have been, where it's like, he could have just been a villain throughout the whole movie, but then comes back out as a hero in later films and series. Overall, I thought this movie was actually really great. Not quite as good as the first film, but it was still absolutely amazing. So you're gonna go in the B tier, between Ant-Man and Spider-Man: Homecoming. And then we get into Phase 5 with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Interesting fact: I haven't seen this movie in HD, and I haven't seen this movie in theaters. So I'll be watching it fully on Disney+. Well, I did watch the full thing, finally, because I was able to see the post-credit scenes in full daylight. But, you know, the fun thing about this movie is, of course, the world of the quantum realm, and Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror, the introduction to him finally as Kang the Conqueror. Just the whole performance of that was great. But even then, the whole movie itself just does not have any character stuff. It's like, it's the biggest of all the Ant-Man films, and it's supposed to be the one that sets up everything. But part of what makes these films so great is that not only are they just setting up future movies, they're also experiences. And that's what makes these movies so special. Like, yeah, they set up great movies. Take inspiration from Civil War. It was a great movie, but it also set up movies like Black Panther and Spider-Man, and those movies were great too. And with this movie, it's like, it was mostly just all about setting up the villain of Kang. You didn't really set up any interesting story with any of the characters. Sure, they were charismatic as always, but there wasn't any interesting story going for them in the movie. And that was probably the most disappointing thing about this movie here. At the same time, I hope that we were rumored to get an Ant-Man 4. I hope they handle that better. My only question is, where would I put this movie? It's kind of a tricky one. And I'm probably... I'll put it between Doctor Strange and Spider-Man just because I think the story of the way that was executed was great. The characters in it was not that great. Spider-Man kind of focuses more on entertainment. It has a lot more better, it has worse story issues. And then finally we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm just going to say right now, I think that this film is probably the most perfect conclusion to the Guardians franchise, where they were able to take this story, and honestly, this is probably one of the best sequels to Endgame, where you take these characters that we've known for 9 years, you tell these interesting stories with Peter Quill dealing with the loss of Gamora, and he's been running his whole life, so he goes back to his grandfather. You have Nebula, who's been with Rocket for almost 5 years and spent those 5 years with him. You got Mantis, who defends Drax for being stupid. You got Drax being the fun dad like he always used to be. You got Rocket, who finally realizes his potential of being a raccoon and finally realizes he's worth something. You got Groot, who's just this cool-ass, badass character. You got Kraglin, who finally gets to use his arrow. You get Cosmo being a good dog. You get High Evolutionary, who's this cruel person. You also get the backstory of Rocket, which is this cruel backstory and brutal and so cruel and horrible. The soundtrack is great. The action sequences are great. The comedy is great. The drama is great. All of it was great. I do have some nitpicks with the character of Adam Warlock and the way that was used, and some of the stuff with Gamora and them thinking not her remembering her. They don't remember her. She doesn't remember because she hasn't experienced it yet. And then also the Ravagers could have been used more. And then also the way that the drama and the humor worked. I'm questioning as to whether I think it worked or not. But at the same time, I don't care. This movie was awesome because it really is a true James Gunn film. And honestly, I'm sorry, Toby and Andrew, but this is actually better than No Way Home. This is the best sequel. This is the best movie since Avengers Endgame. I have to say that. So that is my MCU tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All of my social media stuff is in the about section over there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.